Today's concept for discussion is pollution. Pollution actually means the introduction of foreign bodies into the environment. That is, the discharge of foreign substances into the environment. These foreign substances, they are harmful, poisonous, dangerous. And when we talk about environment, we're talking about air, land, and water. Now, pollution could be categorized into two. One based on the physical environment, that is, based on the physical environment that we have talked about. So, when materials are introduced into the environment, we have air pollution, water pollution, and land pollution. The second category is by analog. When we talk about analog, it's not the material resources not introduced into the environment this time, but by electromagnetic pollution. So we have examples like noise pollution, light pollution, and thermal pollution. So we're talking about this one. Analog means that by the description of the exact thing that was being introduced into the environment. So that is why we have noise pollution, we have a light pollution. Now let's look at the different types of pollution. We have mentioned under those different categories. We have air pollution. So when substances, harmful substances, dangerous substances are introduced into the atmosphere, it is referred to as air pollution. We have examples like carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide. Example of carbon monoxide being introduced into the atmosphere is the smoke that comes out of the exhaust of cars when cars are in motion. Then we have water pollution. Water pollution is introduction of harmful substances into the sources of water. We have examples like industrial waste, sewage. So when harmful substances, when they are introduced into our different bodies of water, like streams, rivers, we refer to that as water pollution. And examples of those are industrial waste or sewage, even sewage from our homes. When they are channeled into different bodies of water, that is called water pollution. Now, the next one is land pollution. Land pollution is the introduction of harmful substances into the land. When harmful substances are introduced into the land, that is a land pollution. And we have examples like fertilizer, we have waste, different types of waste, we have industrial waste. So industrial, the mining industries, if some industrial waste, they're channeled to the land, or maybe it's mining industries. In mining industries, when they mine substances, maybe from the ground or from inside the water, and you have them spill over on the land, then it becomes land pollution. Then we have a noise pollution. Noise pollution is excessive, harmful sound that disrupts the natural balance. That is, when you have sounds coming out from somewhere disturbing the natural balance, then we refer to that as a noise pollution. We have examples like the noise from the aircraft, noise we have from construction works, that is from their machines and all the stuffs. Some noise comes from the industrial machines also, even from the household noise. We have a noise pollution. Then we have light pollution. Light pollution is when we have excessive, inappropriate use of artificial outdoor light. That is, the lights we see outdoor, outside the house, outside the buildings. They are what we refer to as outdoor light. So when we have the excessive, inappropriate use of this artificial lights, and they interfere or it interferes with the natural environment, it becomes a light pollution. Example is the high intensity street lights, the over illumination at unoccupied offices, or even parking lots that we have at night. Then we also have what we describe as a thermal pollution. Thermal pollution is a harmful introduction of heat or high temperature into natural waters. When you have introduction of a high temperature into natural waters or heat into our natural bodies of water, we refer to that as thermal pollution. This we have an example such as the cooling waters from um, power plants in our companies, industries. Then some industrial waste they also increases the temperature of the environment. Now, what are the effects of pollution? We're going to look at the effect this pollution causes on the environment at the local level, then later maybe at the global level. At the local level now, we need to know that pollution causes environmental damages. That is, pollution damages the environment and it reduces the quality of the environment. And then we need to know that this effect of pollution, it is a chain reaction. It does not really stop at one place. So, for example, if it affects the plant, you have the indirect effect on uh, the animals, or even on human beings. So, we're going to look at the effect of each of these different types of pollution. Now, air pollution, it releases toxins, then it damages crops, the crops become damaged, then it causes acid rains. When we have the substances uh, eliminated into the atmosphere or released into the atmosphere, when rain falls, does the water from the rain dissolves the substance, and the rain that is falling now becomes an acid rain. This harms organisms that are in aquatic environment, that is, organisms that live inside water. When the rain gets inside the water, then it also affects the respiratory system. It affects our respiratory system too. It also allows black carbon, that is soot, the black smoke that comes out of maybe the vehicles or some machines. It also allows the black carbon allows snow and ice to absorb light and dissolve easily. So these are effects of air pollution. Now, when you look at the effects of water pollution, you say that water pollution contaminates sources of water. Then it reduces the quality of oxygen content in the water, and it causes the death. When the quantity of oxygen in the water is reduced, automatically it can cause the death of organisms that are living there, that we refer to as aquatic life. Then we have land pollution. Land pollution destroys organisms and destroys the habitat. Organisms that are living in the soil, especially, it destroys them and it destroys their habitat. So it also makes the land unsuitable for agriculture. That is, when the land is polluted, it will not be suitable to plant different types of crops by farmers. Then we have noise pollution. Noise pollution is actually, like I told you, the release of unwanted noise into the environment. The main thing it does is causes cardiovascular disease. We have different types of cardiovascular disease, like we have high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke. All these ones are examples of cardiovascular disease. Noise pollution can also cause sleep disturbance. That is, it can cause somebody to be having sleep disturbance. It can increase someone's anxiety. It can also cause depression in an individual. It also causes hearing damage. You see, the noise, after someone has been exposed to it continually, there is what we call eardrum in our ear. This eardrum is very thin, and so after some time, when the noise has been entering the ear, it damages it gradually, until after a very long time, the ear will now becomes damaged. Then another thing the noise pollution does is that it interferes with animals' ability to communicate. They will not be able to communicate because it will interfere with what they hear, the sound. And most importantly, it interferes with their ability to be able to detect when predators are around. And we have a long-term exposure. When an individual has been exposed for a very long time to noise, it leads to headache, continuous headache, and fatigue. When we look at the light pollution inhibits natural behavior of nocturnal animals. Nocturnal animals are those animals that come out at night. So when there is light, it interrupts their behavior at night. Then it slows down plant growth. Light pollution also slows down plant growth and acts as a barrier to wildlife, that is to animals in the jungle, animals in the forest. They will not be able to move very well when there is a light pollution. And as a result of this, it reduces the different types of animals or plants that's supposed to be there. That's why we say that it reduces light pollution, reduces biodiversity. Then we have thermal pollution. Thermal pollution, when we have increased temperature in the body of water, it will going to affect some plants because it's going to affect some organisms, both plants and animals there, and some other microorganisms. They will be shocked. They're going to get what we refer to as a thermal shock. That is, a sudden increase in temperature will affect their bodies. Then the oxygen in the water will also, the dissolved oxygen in the water will also be reduced. And another thing is that we have some organisms like bacteria, like algae. They thrive very well where you have high temperature. So in water, when you have the temperature being increased as a result of a thermal pollution, you have the increase in the growth of organisms like bacteria, like algae. And when you now have increased growth of these ones, it makes the quality of such water to be reduced. And so such water will be unfit for drinking and other domestic use. Now, let's look at the effect of pollution on the environment at global level. At global level, pollution causes climate change and greenhouse gas emission. The greenhouse gas emission, the most common one is methane. Methane is a greenhouse gas and it's usually been emitted from waste. So when it is emitted from waste, it has the potential of increasing the global temperature. And so when the temperature is increased, that is when the global temperature is increased, it has the tendency to affect the climate, and it may affect the climate change, especially it may affect the ozone layer that we have there. Then we have what we call the toxic leachate. Toxic leachate from normally comes from the improper dumps and landfills. That is improper dumps of waste on the land. And it's, when you have this, the land becomes contaminated, the soil becomes contaminated, and the groundwater. When we talk about the groundwater, we're talking about the water inside the soil. So it becomes contaminated, and when the water becomes contaminated, it continues to flow, within the soil, within the ground, and you cannot determine the distance of the movement of the water under the ground. Then dumping of materials like plastic, at the marine or coast, it leads to the killing of some marine animals and marine organisms that are present there. And it can also disrupt the ecosystem. It disrupt the ecosystem that is present within the marine environment, either inside the water or by the coast. Then we can also have the effect of pollution could also be habitat degradation. That is, the natural ecosystem will become degraded. That is, it will become reduced. The quality will become reduced. That's what we mean by habitat degradation. Now, let's look at the effects of resource depletion on the environment. Now, when pollution takes place, we have resource depletion. And when we have resource depletion now, we want to look at what happens on the environment. Now, when we talk about resources, we're talking about natural assets, natural materials, like minerals, like water, like the land, like the forest. The fuel is actually also a resource. Now, when we say resource depletion actually means that those resources, they are being consumed more than they are being replenished. That is, more than they are being replaced. We could have another thing is that we could have contamination. When we have water pollution, for example, we have contamination of water, then we have scarcity of water. Now, for example, we cannot increase the number of rivers that we have. For example, we cannot increase the number of oceans that we have or the seas that we have in the entire world. So if we now begin to pollute the different bodies of water, we cannot increase them. We are reducing the quality, and as we reduce the quality, we are also reducing, the availability of water, because we could have some pollution that could, reduce the quantity of quality water that is inside this one. So that is why inside this bodies of water, that is why the effects could be contamination and scarcity of water. Then it could also have a little erosion and soil degradation. Erosion is actually the removal or the transport of soil, the surface soil, and if it continues, it will dig deep. So when you have erosion taking place as a result of pollution, when land has been polluted with different things, erosion will carry all these materials down to, you know, um, different distance, can land, and this will land into the different rivers, and continues and continue to the different seas and oceans. So in the process, we have degradation of the soil, because certain minerals or certain things must have been removed from the soil, and so the soil is now, degraded. That is not the quality of the soil has been reduced. Then we also have habitat destruction. Definitely, the habitat, when we say habitat, that's the place of abode, a place where organisms live. Now, when we have this one, what the effect is going to have on the environment is that you have the habitat of some organisms will be destroyed. Like, for example, now the habitat of some soil, the soil as an habitat of some organisms will be destroyed when we have land pollution, or maybe when we have even when we have a water pollution. And so when we have the habitats being destroyed, we have biodiversity loss. That is, some organisms will not be present there. So the availability of different organisms in a particular ecosystem will be, will be reduced, and the biodiversity will be lost. Now, effect of a resources depletion continues as we look at air pollution being causing respiratory diseases. In human beings, air pollution causes respiratory diseases. Different diseases in human beings, different respiratory diseases could be caused as a result of uh, air pollution. Then another thing is that we have increase in natural disaster. When we have pollution, there could be increase in natural disasters like flood that may come naturally. So if we have, for example, if we have land pollution, some substances that have been deposited there will act as barrier and may stand in the way of the movement of water during rain, when rain is falling. And if at the end of the day, all these substances are eroded or carried or transported to any nearby bodies of water, they may act as barrier. They will even act as barrier in the water, and they can reduce the quantity of water in that particular place. And so, when that happens, by the time rain is falling, it may cause, it may act as obstacle for the flow of water, and it may result into flood. So that's an example of how we will be faced with the risk of natural disaster. Then we also have destruction of coastal ecosystem. When we talk about coastal ecosystem, we're talking about marine habitat. So we're talking about marine habitat, those that live within the sea or in the ocean, and at the base, that is around the base. So with this ones, you have the uh, coastal ecosystem being destroyed when we have pollution taking place, and effect we have on the resource depletion. Then there's also what we call the release of chlorofluorocarbons during pollution. Chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs, they are released, they release chlorine and bromine. When they release chlorine and bromine, this chlorine and bromine, they destroy uh, ozone layer molecules faster, because when they move up, there's a layer that we describe that is called a ozone layer. This ozone layer is the layer that is between the ozone layer is between the sun and the earth. Let's say this is the sun, this is the earth. The ozone layer is a thin layer that is between the sun and the earth. And what does it do? The function of the ozone layer is to prevent the direct um, the direct rays. It prevents the dangerous, let me put it like that, the dangerous ultraviolet rays from the sun from reaching the earth directly, so that it's not going to destroy or cause any damage on the organisms that are living there. It causes, to human beings, for example, it causes skin cancer. So this ozone depletion substances, they are usually present in cooling systems like fridge, freezer, what again? Um, yeah, air conditions. So our air condition systems, we have this ozone depletion substances. So what happens is that when they are polluted, when they are being used, these substances are released into the environment, and when these substances are released into the environment, they find their ways up there into the ozone layer. And when they get there, they make the layer to be thin and thin. Then another effect of this resource depletion on the environment is climate change. Pollution contributes to increasing, global temperature. And when we have increasing global temperature, it leads to extreme weather condition. It affects the weather condition, and that is why when it affects weather condition, we begin to have inappropriate, weather condition. That is, when the temperature is supposed to be cool, it may be too cool. When its temperature is supposed to be warm, it may be very, very high. The temperature may be very high. Now, let's look at examples. These are examples of this example of air pollution from an industry. So the smoke coming out from an industry, it goes up there to an industry. From an industry, it goes high up. It pollutes the air, and depending on the substance, it may affect the ozone layer. Depending. Then there's another one. This one is water pollution. That's the pipe, showing the pipe coming out from an industry being emptied into a particular environment. And that is being emptied into a particular environment that is a source of water, maybe a stream or a river, I can say now. So when it empties there, whatever is being emptied may increase the temperature of the water, will definitely reduce the oxygen content of the water. And when the oxygen content of the water is reduced, it's going to affect the organisms that are living there, the life in the water. And when the life in the water is affected, some may not be able to survive, and so some of the organisms there may die, and the water quality will even be reduced, and will affect the ecosystem in the water in that particular habitat. This is another one. And this one, you say that what happens here is you have so many things that have been deposited there to pollute the water. Now, this is a stream or a river. It is likely that the pollutant is likely that those stuffs they got there as a result of pollution. As a result of erosion from different places. Now you see that the quantity of the river or the stream, the body of water has been reduced. That is, the width of the river has been reduced, as we have seen it, and the flow has been reduced also. The rate at which is the stream or the river is flowing has been reduced because the pollutant are acting as obstacles to the rate of flowing of the water that is present there. Then it has covered some spaces. So because it has covered those stuffs has covered some spaces, it has reduced the oxygen content in the water, and it has also reduced the movements of some organisms. So invariably, some organisms will not be able to survive, and so they may have died, and so reducing the life within the water. Now, this is a form of land pollution. All the land there that you have there, you have the land being polluted by different particular substances. These substances are dangerous, but what we can see here is that a larger percentage of a particular land has been covered by some dangerous or some substances. This is an example of land pollution, and this is another one. This one is not as much as the other one, the one we just say in the other, we saw at the other place. But this is how it starts. This is how land pollution starts. If the dropping of the bottles and some other things continues, it's going to cover the space. And when it covers the space everywhere, we're not going to have the green plants again. And it's going to affect some other organisms that are present in the soil. So these are a few examples of the different types of pollution that we have. And we are seeing the different pictures of how pollution take place. And we have also seen how they affect our environment. Thank you for listening.